Hello everyone, welcome to the Rainbow Activation Code. I'm Justine Sarabin, and today I'm here with Paul Reimers. I'm just
Hi.
going to tell you, hi. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome.
I'm going to read you a little intro about him, and then we'll jump right into the interview, okay? Okay, so Paul Reimers has been meditating, studying different energetic practices and meditative disciplines for 27 years. He has personally studied with Drunvalo Melchizedek several times and was personally certified by him to teach his work as a teacher in the School of Remembering. So cool. He leads the Los Angeles Sacred Geometry Meetup, the Los Angeles Alchemy Meetup, and the Los Angeles NLP Meetup, where he writes and teaches new classes in each area regularly. He is a certified NLP master practitioner and trainer, and he is currently developing new applications that blend NLP tools with processes that shift energy and consciousness. And you can check out more of his work at paulreimers.com, and we'll have a link to that below. Okay. Hello, Paul.
Hey, Justine, how you doing?
Good. So today we want to just talk about sacred geometry and how that connects to bringing out the best version of ourselves.
Yeah,
So,
awesome.
yeah, tell us about what sacred geometry is, I guess, just to start.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. So, and that's a great question because I think that the most important thing for people to get a connection with it is understand what it is, like what makes geometry sacred. We've all had geometry in junior high. Usually
Totally.
didn't feel so sacred, you know. So it's a matter of what makes it sacred, and
Yeah.
then what do we actually use it for? So it's like, okay, there's that thing as exists. What's the purpose of drawing some of these things? So it's interesting. The more I've worked with sacred geometry and drawn the forms and meditated with it and studied with it, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, go into a little bit more depth with it. But the more I see it expanding, the more my understanding of it, the more impressions that I get, and I'll write those, and then that'll be a future class. But what I've found is that I used to just think that sacred geometry was, okay, like Metatron's cube or the flower of life or any one of these things that I actually call archetypes. They're sort of sacred geometrical archetypes. Like they have a specific identity. There's different capacities and different functions that are within them. So I usually refer to them that way. But so I used to think, oh, that's what sacred geometry is. And now as I'm doing it, the more I get into it, when you do anything, any sort of geometric form, and you bring an awareness of the sacredness to it, I feel like that's sacred geometry. You could draw a line, you could draw a circle, and if you bring that awareness to it, it'll have that sacred geometrical concept. So it's basically the subjective and the objective. And one of the things about Metatron's cube specifically, I just did a class on it, and one of the things that came forward is it's about balancing the subjective and the objective, the inner world and the outer world. That's one of the things that can be really done well with Metatron's cube. And so anyway, so in terms of working with it, one of the biggest things I've found of like the reasons why someone could do it is it really creates a state of balance and state of harmony between your inner world, your outer world, the subjective and the objective. There's also a big thing too that keeps coming forward about the sacred feminine, the sacred masculine, and balancing those two things. And the more things come in the news, the more friction and sort of antagonism and difficulty that comes with this sort of like the sacred feminine, sacred masculine. One of the things about sacred geometry that I think is really amazing is that in sacred geometry, like a point and a line are more the masculine, and the arc, the circle, any kind of curve is more feminine. So when you're actually drawing a sacred geometrical pattern, you can do it purely objectively. You can say, I'm going to do the flower of life. But if you bring the subjective to that as well, with an understanding of the meaning of a point or a line or a circle or an arc, and you basically are, it's almost like you're dancing both dances at once. You can hold, like for a circle, for example, the sacred masculine sort of holds ground, it holds space. It's that strong pivot point, and the feminine is the arc that gracefully and beautifully goes around. And you can see that they sort of co-create each other, and they complement each other. And if you don't hold a strong center, you won't get a nice, even, perfect circle. So they co-create each other. So when you tap into that and you bring that subjectively to the thing that you're objectively doing, you're basically bringing the sacred and you're balancing it while you're drawing it. So it's not you're just ending up with the finished thing. You're basically balancing those aspects within yourself. Because a lot of times when people feel antagonism, if certain people will identify strongly with the feminine and there's some antagonism towards masculine, or they identify with the masculine, there's some judgment or antagonism towards the feminine. When you see both aspects and you are enacting both of them, you can feel both of them within yourselves. And one thing I wanted to mention too is that just like all of these geometries have some masculine, some feminine blended together in them, one of the things that's really interesting is that whether you're in a masculine body or a feminine body, or whatever your sexual orientation is, or your gender identity, one of the things I've found is that it's sort of like on a small level, like the little sacred feminine or the little sacred masculine, it's sort of like atoms come together to form molecules. So when I say the sacred feminine or sacred masculine, I would just ask for people to not think, oh, I'm talking about a man or I'm talking about a woman. What I'm really talking about is the small pieces that make us up. And it's sort of like atoms coming together to make molecules, or cells coming together to form tissues. It's like these small pieces that come together to form a greater whole. So our unique sexual preference, body type, gender identity, all of these things, gender identification, all of these aspects are just complexes of different qualities and different amounts and proportions of sacred feminine and sacred masculine. The other thing that I would like to say too is that in drawing these, it's not like it's harmonizing them and finding your perfect balance between them. It's not like the ideal evolutionary point is to be 50-50 or anything like that. It's basically to free up any blockages, to open up the flow, and realize that when you have both capacities fully active and you understand and can kind of dance both dances, that you have more total available energy to create. And I could share in a couple minutes how I specifically use the masculine and feminine. I kind of go back and forth when I'm creating classes and workshops and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Really quick. So are you saying that when you're actually drawing these shapes yourself, you're activating this within yourself?
Yes, exactly. And I can feel like as simple as drawing a circle. So the flower of life, for example, is made up of circles. So I can just hold this one up, and this is a really interesting archetype that's useful for shifting perspectives and lots of different things. But every time I draw a circle in any pattern, I really feel like the sacred masculine strongly and devotedly holding that space. Yeah. So the sacred feminine can create that beautiful arc. So I'll feel the rootedness and the strength of the sacred masculine holding that center, holding that strong center, and that sort of like loyalty and that support, and the sacred feminine dancing in like that beautiful sort of arc. It's sort of like seeing a woman dance in like a flowing fabric and that swirl of the fabric. It's like that kind of feeling. So if you can bring that sort of feeling to drawing a circle, you will have a feeling-based connection to the sacred masculine and also the sacred feminine, and you'll actually be exercising both. And you're sort of opening up both pathways so you have access to both energies, if that makes sense.
Yes, beautifully said. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Yeah. Did you want to share what that's like for you?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So it might sound strange because a lot of people think about gender and they think, sex or sexual orientation or body type. So I just wanted to talk a little bit more about it in terms of like sort of the essence of it. As I said, it's not about male body or female body or whatever kind of sexual preference. It's like a certain kind of charge that moves things in a certain way. So the easiest way I can describe it in terms of principles is like electricity. Like the electricity is more masculine, magnetism is more feminine. and they both create each other. Every time there's an electric current, there's a magnetic field. You can use magnets to generate electricity like a generator. So they co-create each other. They give rise to each other. The right side of your brain is more feminine. The left side of your brain is more masculine. They cross to the other sides of your body. The energy channel in the front is more feminine. The conception vessel, governor vessel going up the back is more masculine. When you put your tongue to the roof of your mouth, and you can allow that circulation and integrate them. And so those are just a couple examples. But what I'd like to share about my, my experience with it is that in teaching classes and doing workshops, the writing process, what I'll do is I'll have a question in my mind, and I'll think, well, what's another use for this, or how can I work with this? And it'll just be a big question mark. What that is that's the negative polarity. That is sort of the divine feminine that is pulling. It's like attraction. It's pulling new things in. So if I just allow there to be a question, and so many times we are sort of, as a society, people don't like to feel vulnerable sometimes, or feel like they don't have the answer. So they'll feel that vulnerability of not knowing the answer. I wonder how it's going to go. And they'll immediately, the quickest answer that comes will cancel out that negative polarity, but it's only from another slightly higher level of their mind. It's just their conscious mind just giving them the most available answer. But if you allow yourself to rest in that sort of the sacred feminine, the negative polarity, and be in it, and just be receptive, at a certain point, there'll be this impression will come. And whenever the answer comes, I'll excitedly go and I'll rush and I'll write it down and I'll get all fired up. And that's sort of the divine masculine. It's building and focusing and channeling. It's this massive amount of energy. And I'm so excited, and I'm writing all these things down like rapidly. And it's just like, oh, this is amazing. And this connects this way. This enthusiasm, that exuberant sort of energy building. And that's sort of divine masculine. And then when I have it all out on paper, I figure, oh, okay, that's all moved out. That's moved in direction. So one moves in the direction in, one moves in the direction out. So once I have it all on paper, I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. I wonder what else I can use it for. It's another question. Divine feminine. So that will pull new things in. And sometimes if I have a class and I'll put something out there, and I don't ever put anything out there that I will have no idea how I'm going to do. But sometimes I put class descriptions out there, and I'll know that I can do it, but I won't know how I can do it. And I'll think, well, it's going to be interesting. Let's see. And that'll create a really strong negative polarity that'll pull in, oh, here's how you do it. And sometimes I'll wake up in the night 2 or 3 times and jot ideas down, and I'll look at it and say, oh, well, that's the class now. All the stuff I thought it was going to be is gone. But if you have that question mark, that big question mark, that will draw stuff in. So it's sort of like in grammar, these things are all about through grammar too. So question mark is more feminine. It's curved. Exclamation mark is masculine. It's a straight line and a point. So you can think like a question mark is a hook. It's like to hook and draw in new things. It's curved, has a curve in it. It's more feminine. Straight point and thing is an exclamation mark. It's about focusing, intensifying, that intensity and that exuberance. It's more a statement than a question. So if you have too many questions or too many, strong, powerful, big energetic things, it's out of balance. You need to have the day and you need to have the night, the masculine and the feminine. And one of my biggest things in inspirations in teaching sacred geometry is to teach people how you can access both of them. It doesn't say anything about like, you're more masculine, or, oh, you're more feminine, or whatever. It's basically saying, learn, if you care about creation, you will learn to work with these two energies because they're essential to creation. So if you care, the more you care about creation, the more you need to open this up to be able to use the feminine and the masculine to draw things in and create.
Interesting. That makes me think about that. It's called the Taurus, I think.
Yes, absolutely.
Does that connect to?
So I have that here. There's two around the heart. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what that is?
Oh, but I apologize. I didn't mean to cut you off. I just got all excited. I got a picture of that. So please continue what you were going to say about the Taurus.
Well, no, it just felt like that it was connected. And
yes.
I want to ask you if you could describe what that what that is, and if that connects to what you're talking about right
Absolutely, yeah. So the main archetypes that I've found that are most effective, and they all have at least 2 or 3 really specific applications.
now.
So the flower of life is about shifting and shifting perspective. Metatron's cube is balancing and ecology and harmony about the different elements, and the Taurus is, as you mentioned, it's about flow. So you can see, hopefully it'll show up, but basically there's 3 kinds of Tauruses. There's one that's called the ring Taurus, which has a hole in the center. So you can picture a donut, has a hole in the center. That's a ring Taurus. This is a tube Taurus. So if you have a donut, for example, and it kind of expands until it closes, that's really what comes out. There's a nested tube Taurus that emanates from the heart. There's an outer energetic field and an inner energetic field. So one of the things about that that's really interesting is there's one of the lessons I found from it is about giving and receiving. So a lot of times people would maybe be really, people that are givers, like just natural givers, they just give and give and give. And that's really noble and beautiful and amazing. But if you don't allow yourself to receive, it's not really balanced. You will burn yourself out. There's people that just receive, 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 but they're not giving. And that leads to another type of stagnation. So one of the lessons I've found with working for the Taurus, and I've taught classes on it, and I've developed meditative processes I'll guide people through. One of the processes for the Taurus is about fully receiving and fully giving. And I was at a part of a seminar one time, and there's really pretty simple but brilliant process that was in it. They were talking about being really good receivers. And it was a huge thing. It was like 1,000 people in this room. And they had everyone stand up, and they said, okay, here's what you're going to do. You're going to look around the room, and if you see someone before they see you, you lock your eyes on them. And when they turn and see you, the person who saw the other first, give them the heartfelt, genuine compliment. And the other person, the rule is you can just say, thank you, and fully receive it. And then you try to find somebody that you can give a compliment to. So it's the thing, a lot of times we will say, oh, you're so good at this. Oh yeah, but you're so great at this. And that's great. And it's balanced in a sense, but sometimes it can feel like you're ricocheting. You're not fully receiving the compliment. You're not really feeling and receiving the compliment completely. You're sort of bouncing it back and giving it to the other, and people that are natural givers that just give and give and give, as I said, that's a totally beautiful thing. But if they have trouble receiving, they're the ones who are the fastest to bounce a compliment back and turn it into another compliment for the person. So
Yeah, that's really important to do that. Thank you.
yeah, and there's energetic things you can use the toroidal fields around the heart too. There's different energetic processes and things like that I developed that are useful for that as well, because it's really about cycling energy. One of the things about the Taurus is it's not a polarized thing. It's a unified. There's only one surface. There's not an inside or outside. It just flows. It flows into the center and then comes back out around, and it goes like that. It's just one surface. It just flows on the surface.
And is that sort of like our energetic field?
Yes, actually, there's a number of different Tauruses. There's one around the head, one around the whole body. There's a nested one around the heart. And even if you look at nature, a lot of really amazing things about sacred geometry are just found in nature. You can look and see like a tangerine. An orange has it, but like the little round tangerines, you open that up, that is exactly a Taurus. You can see an apple and like the way it comes in, the way it goes out. And like there's kind of the squat, like the little apples, not the big long like red ones, but sort of like they're really Taurus shaped. It's amazing because the tangerines literally have lines that go like this that come in and go out. They're perfect little Tauruses, So you can see that nature, as the flower was pollinated in this fruit grove, it's circulating nutrients and it's circulating material in that flow, because that's just such an easy, natural way for energy to flow and materials to flow, where everything moves and nothing gets stagnant.
Love that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And what about Metatron's cube?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Here, let me hold that up.
In this series, we've been talking a lot about the Merkaba.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, Metatron's cube, it's really interesting, because if you have the flower of life, so here's the flower of life, and if you can see that there's circles that are complete and circles that are incomplete. If you complete the circles, and it's these tangent circles, like a circle and then it spreads out in these ways, you'll end up with this pattern. And if you connect every center to every other center, that creates Metatron's cube. So what's interesting about Metatron's cube is there's these things called the Platonic solids. And if you, all of the Platonic solids, and it's sort of a little bit involved, but you know, to be a Platonic solid, it has to be, every face has to be the same size, the same interior angle, same edge length. You know, if you put it in a sphere, all of the points need to touch. So within Metatron's cube, if you look at this, and you can see that within it, there's a cube within a cube, just like the nested torus of the heart. Yeah. There's a tetrahedron, like a star tetrahedron within a star tetrahedron, just by connecting those points. So all I've done is I've inked some of the lines. So the ones that are in pencil are just Metatron's cube. The ones that are inked are for this, bringing out the, so that's the octahedron. And this is the icosahedron. And then the last one is the dodecahedron. And each one of them is sort of resonates with a different element. So it's really interesting too, because when you have an inner torus and an outer torus, or an inner cube and an outer cube, there's lots of different ways to see it. But one of the processes that I've developed that people have found useful is focusing on the subjective and the objective. And one of the things that I think that sacred geometry does so well is to open up creativity, to help you maybe see blind spots. If you have a habitual way of doing things, habitual point of view, you might think this thing is great, but this thing is not, but it's just based on old perceptions and habits. So if you take sacred geometry and you allow your mind to go blank and you're making these patterns, what can happen is you can allow these other impressions to come in and you know, sort of, you know, resolve these blind spots. So one of the examples I give is an artist. So say, for example, if someone's an artist, like a performer, like a musician, and they're playing, and we've all heard those musicians who have fantastic technical ability, but maybe we're not moved by what they are doing. So I would say they have an abundance of the objective skill, but the subjective, the inner feeling, maybe isn't there strongly enough to really carry out. Then there's artists that maybe have a strong internal feeling, but if they haven't mastered their craft, they're lacking the objective means of conveying it to people. So with Metatron's cube and some of these forms, you can really start to see, oh, I'm really great at the subjective, but not great at the objective, you know, or vice versa. And you know, it's just sort of like the subjective and objective, the sacred masculine, sacred feminine. One of the things that I tell people, that it's, you know, if people feel like they have a bias, like, well, no, but we're you know, this gender or this point of view is right, and this other, you know, is basically, I'll say, well, okay, take a look at some three-dimensional object across your room, and then cover one of your eyes. And then they'll do that and say, yeah, and I'll say, what changed? What it is you lost depth. So it takes, to see depth perception, you need to have two eyes, slightly different points of view aimed at one thing. And so when you cover one of your eyes, you lack depth. And I feel that, you know, in Taoist cosmology, they say Wu Qi is like this empty, you know, everyone knows the yin yang symbol, but in Taoist cosmology, they have this empty circle they call Wu Qi. Then it separates into a white half and a dark half. And it's sort of like, and they call that chaos. And then what goes into what they call the Tai Chi symbol, which has the little, the dark field and the little white circle and the little, you know, dark circle in the white field, you know, that the modern Tai Chi symbol, they call that harmony, or that Tai Chi means grand ultimate. What that means is the masculine and feminine are sort of enfolded within each other. It's not the push and pull. It's not 100% this and 100% that. And I feel like within our bodies, within our sense perceptions, like our seeing depth within our eyes, we have both within us, and that gives us more harmony than if we were 100% one or 100% another. So,
Interesting.
yeah. Yeah.
What about the, can you kind of give like an overview what the seed of life to the, I think it's Pisces.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So yeah.
Like,
oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I totally can. So when you start, so you can see, if you look at the center of this, there's one circle. So when you have one circle, and then you move the compass point up to the surface of that circle at like the 12 o'clock position. You make a circle there, and at each intersection, you move the compass point. So when the shorthand I created is, I say the compass point is the needle part of the compass, and when I say pencil point, that's the lead part of or the pen point, if you're gonna say that.
Right.
So you would move the compass point to the last intersection and draw the circle. When you have one circle with 6 around it, that's the seed of life, and that's sort of the essential pattern. When you grow that out, that becomes the flower of life. And if you extend that out, that becomes these 13 circles, and you connect the center of every one to every other one, and that becomes Metatron's cube. So it's this sort of natural evolution unfolding. And what's really interesting too about the Platonic solids, and for those people out there that may or may not have done Dungeons and Dragons, there's like these little, if you notice, these Dungeons and Dragons dice are the Platonic solids. So I have a set that's, and to show another thing that's kind of cool about natural principles is that I've got one crystal here that's fluorite, and this naturally forms. It's an octahedron. It's not polished. It's an octahedron, and if you hit it, it fractures into octahedral patterns. So it's a natural principle. So when you have the flower of life to the seed of life extended out to Metatron's cube, that gives birth to the Platonic solids. And there's I think his name is Richard Moon or Robert Moon, that he found that the Platonic solids organized the periodic table. Like that was a structure behind the periodic table. So if you look at these essential elements, that it manifests in these archetypal forms, these Platonic solids, and then organic life fills in those forms and creates these all the different elements in the periodic table. You can see it's the simple seed, and I like to call it harmonic complexity, because when someone comes up with a complex idea that's based on a million rules, it's kind of can be sort of a mess. But if you think about it and you have a simple principle, and that principle naturally blossoms and expands and it becomes complex, then that is a whole different level of complexity than say, for example, something that's just overly ornate. Yeah. Oh, and the one thing I wanted to add is if I could talk just briefly about what I found is the 3 levels of working with sacred geometry.
Yes, please.
Okay, cool. All right, so when I first learned about it, like I've been studying it for a while, I just was interested. I loved the nautilus shape, that harmonic kind of thing. I was like, oh, I didn't know what it was, but I was attracted to it, and I thought that was really neat. And then at a certain point, I started pursuing it. So I would say that the first level of it is just awareness of sacred geometry. But it's always, when it starts out, it's indirect. So you might go to a crystal shop and you might be going there for crystals, and you happen to see a t-shirt, or you see some sort of like a mandala or something like that has sacred geometry on it. And I call that just awareness. You just have an awareness of it. Or you buy the Coldplay album that has a flower of life on the cover. You're going there to buy the album, but then you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then at a certain point, you go and you pursue buying those things. You actually pursue the shape. So I would say that's the first phase. And then the second phase is more, you're engaged with it. Like, I like to call it engagement, because you study sacred geometry, and then what you do is you actually learn how to create the patterns. So you read a little bit about it and you draw it. You do a little bit more and you draw it. And one of the things that does is that activates your right brain. It activates your pituitary, because whenever you have a mystical experience and you see geometries, that's just an indicator that your pituitary is stimulated, because that, like in the workshop I teach on the 4th day, there's these energetic thresholds of seeing a quality of light, and then there's geometries and all these things happen. But really what it comes down to is, as soon as geometries form, that the pituitary is getting stimulated. So just by creating these forms, so we talked about the balancing of the masculine, feminine, the subjective and objective, but just by creating them, you're exercising the pituitary, and you're activating it. And so I feel like that's the second phase. You're actually really doing it, and that's a big leap, because you are physically finding ways to create those patterns. And then I feel like the last phase, that it's in each one there's a big drop off. There's a lot more people that have the Coldplay album or have artwork that actually make it, and there's a lot of people who make it, a lot more people that make it than actually actively work with it, meditate with it. So I feel like the third phase, I like to call it like the evolutionary phase, where you create a pattern, then you meditate with it. As your mind is still, like your conscious cognitive verbal processes are still, new impressions come to you about how to use it. And that, so basically then you create a new form, and then new things come about how to use it. So basically you're using the form versus buying it in a store in the first phase. In the second phase, you're creating it, but you're not really generating anything new, because you're recreating a form that exists, and you're reading what other people say about it. And the third form, you're actually creating it, then you're meditating with it. And as you're meditating, all these intuitive impressions that come about how to use it. So about 95% of what I teach is original, because I've spent so much time creating them and meditating with them. All of that information comes through that way. So, I mean, I always acknowledge my teacher, my teacher, Drew Below. He's the first person who really turned me on to sacred geometry. I've had a number of other teachers that I've learned different things from, but most of what I teach in these meetups and things, it's ongoing classes. So it's original new processes that I've learned through the process of drawing them, letting my mind go blank, that negative polarity, the feminine, and then the impressions come in, I get excited and I write it down. So, yeah.
Beautiful. I love that. That's
awesome.
So cool.
Thanks.
Okay, so I have a question for you.
Absolutely, yeah.
If it doesn't resonate in answering it, don't worry about it.
Sure.
But while you're just talking about that, I'm thinking about your teacher, and maybe if you could give a little bit of like how he got, because I think he was sort of like downloaded or taught this information, right?
Oh, you mean Drimbelow?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And
so,
do you have any experience or connection to like other beings teaching this information, or to you, or expanding that awareness directly with you?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'll be happy to answer all that as best I can. So Drimbelow, the thing that I totally love about Drimbelow is I had a chance to study with him in person multiple times. I studied imagery with his wife. I took his workshop with him. And then I took, the teacher certification. Then I took another workshop he did after that. And the thing that I love about him is that his first getting started with like sort of learning and then teaching, he studied with a lot of teachers before he ever taught to other people. And he was guided, he was open to, he saw these two angels, these two energetic beings that were giving him information. And that was the starting point for him. And what they did was they would, got more of a relationship with him, and he was able to receive energy, information from them more easily. And they'd say, oh, you're going to study with this teacher. And then they got very specific. They say, here's the next teacher that you're going to study with. Here's their name. Here's their phone number. And they're expecting your call. It got so specific. Then he called them up and they say, oh yeah, we know about you. Come on by. Or they'd set up a time, and then he'd start. So he had about 30 teachers like that. I mean, he studied alchemy with one. He studied dowsing with one. He studied with all of these different teachers, and these guides were sort of giving him this sort of world-class education, all these different facets and these different points of view. And the thing that I love so much about Drimbelow, other than he's just an amazing person, he's just so warm and so great to be around, that there's a number of people that are tuned into the etheric realm, and they're tuned into guides and angels. There's also people that are tuned into sort of tech and gadgets and sort of ways we can use sort of certain types of technology to optimize human potential. Then there's other people that are really in touch with indigenous cultures. The thing I love about Drimbelow is he's really strongly connected with all of them. There's amazing fun stories about him working with Slim Sperling and Bob Dratch that would come up with these coils and these different things that would clear pollution, and that's pretty unique. Then he would have amazing experiences with like the Kogi, with like the mamas, who are the Kogi shaman are called the mamas. So that's that whole branch. And then he saw these etheric beings he works with too. So that's one of the things I think is so amazing, is that he's got this balance. And talking with him, he's such a brilliant human being, and he's also so so deeply in his heart that you feel his heart and you feel his brilliance at the same time. And I think that that really makes for a balanced person. And like if someone at their full potential, I feel would be really heart-centered and really brilliant at the same time. And that's one of the things too. I think that there's a lot of, just like I said, the exclamation point and the question mark, there's a lot of sort of geometrical thinking that's embedded in our language, and we're sort of not really aware of it anymore. Like we talk about someone who's eccentric. Eccentric means off-center. So that's a geometrical term. Concentric means shapes sharing the same center, just like Metatron's cube. And Metatron's cube, all of these shapes are concentric. They all share the same, which is a state of harmony. So I feel like if you develop your intellectual capacity, the further you go, if you don't develop your emotional and intellectual capacity growing at the same time, if they grow the same rate and the same time, you will still be balanced. But if you do one, then it's giant, and it sort of will tipping point that way. Also, too, another thing that's interesting is that you talk about information. Information means information. Do you understand it enough to create a form from it? Is it a living, breathing, solid thing? Is that information information? Or you can say, let's talk about, we're going to have a conversation. Well, let's talk about it. Meaning, like, let's talk about a subject. About means around. So talk about something is literally like two people walking around a statue, noting the different things they see as they move around it. Literally, when you're talking about something, is you're walking around it verbally and cognitively from these different focal points with another person, two eyes, seeing depth, because it's two slightly different points of view. Yeah. And there's all these amazing geometrical things that are hidden in language. It's literally how we understand and interact with the world, but we just kind of forgot that, Yeah. I think that that's one of the things I love about sacred geometry and consciousness in general. I feel it's sort of like we're all fish and it's the water we're swimming in, but because we're immersed in water, we forget the concept of water, So for me, that's why I feel like consciousness and sacred geometry and all of these things is the most fascinating thing for me, because it's sort of like this essential thing that can be so obviously overlooked because it's so subtle. But it's so subtle, it allows it to permeate every single thing. So.
Beautifully said.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, you're such a good teacher.
Oh, thank you so much. I try.
Well, I want to give you, we're coming up on time, but I want to give you the opportunity to share the offer you have and
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
workshop we're planning.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about that. So the first thing is that I've been looking at different things that would be helpful to offer for people. Whenever I teach a sacred geometry class, I always like to briefly touch on sort of the sacred feminine, sacred masculine, because whatever geometric shape you do, it's in there. And if I can help people harmonize that a little bit more within themselves, and they can go out in the world a little bit more balanced and harmonized, hopefully that can have a ripple effect. So what I did was I decided on my site, to offer for free sort of a fundamentals course, which talks about the sacred geometrical archetypes. It talks about the sacred masculine, sacred feminine, and certain essential things about sacred geometry. So that's on my site for free. So anyone who goes to my site and they just show up there, if someone just enters name and email address, you'll get access to that full course. It's like 5 modules, and each one goes in depth to a certain, but it's all the fundamental stuff to know about sacred geometry. And then what I'm in the process of doing is doing a dedicated course on the Flower of Life, and a dedicated one on Metatron's cubes and Metatron's cube, and all of the things you can do with them, because each archetype has a very unique set of capacities and things that it's so good at. So I'm in the process of creating that as well. But for when you would ask me what would be something to offer, so there's that. So people could just access that for free. Just go into my website. If they opt in, they'll get announcements about upcoming events, upcoming classes, new videos when I put them out. Just like sort of like a newsletter type of thing.
Yeah.
But the other thing I was going to offer, when you had asked me, the email, it kind of inspired this different thought. I thought, well, what would be something new that I haven't offered before that could really be powerful and help people. And I realized that a lot of times people, if they take a class, they learn how to do the flower of life, they learn how to draw it, learn all about it. This, maybe you do a process or two, and then that's the end of the class. But then that leaves each person on their own to apply it to their own life. So when you sent the email asking that question, it kind of got the wheels turning. And I was thinking, well, what if I did this? I already do NLP sessions. Like, I'm a master practitioner and trainer, so I do NLP Skype sessions. I thought, what if I did dedicated sacred geometry sessions with people, and where that way I could email people the essential, they would get an image of the flower of life, Metatron's cube, the golden ratio, the Fibonacci, all of these things, the torus, and then I could do a Skype session with people, an hour-long Skype session. And if someone is looking to balance certain aspects of their life, or helping them create new projects or things like that, each of these archetypes, I can pick one or two archetypes and walk them through and just in the moment do a process with them to help them develop that certain thing. So the flower of life, for example, is really great at shifting perceptual positions. It's also good for dissolving judgment, old patterns, old stuckness, because you can sort of move between form and emptiness, like sort of the Buddhist conception of form and emptiness, or in Taoism, the Tao Te Ching, they talk about form and being and non-being, form and emptiness. So whatever you would like that could be an obstacle that you like to dissolve and let go of and then reform in a new way, the flower of life, I've come up with some processes that really help with that. With Metatron's cube, it's all about ecology. It's like these interconnections and these inner patterns, and how to, if you're creating an organization or a business, or you're doing something, or working with family, or whatever it is, how to create ecology. And ecology, people hear ecology and they think it means nature. And it does, in a sense. The word ecology actually means balance and interconnection of all pieces, that there's a harmony within a system. It's actually a systems thinking term, that all the plants in the forest cooperate and kind of support each other. And there's this natural harmony. So with ecology, what it really means is making sure all of the elements of something are mutually supportive. So with Metatron's cube, for example, there's the subjective and objective, as I mentioned before, but also there's a process, a unique process I created to lay out elements of things to create harmony and ecology with it. And then with the golden mean and Fibonacci, what happens is, if you ever see a nautilus shell, you can see that graceful arc. But if you look at the first couple chambers, it looks a little clunky, because the Fibonacci sequence is like 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and each previous one adds the next one. And the phi ratio is that 1.618 to 1, and that's that perfect ideal arc. But when you first start, if you take the ratio, it's really clumsy. It's way too high and then too low, and then it's still too high, but not quite as high and low. So what it's doing is it's oscillating to find that perfect state. It's getting closer and closer to that ideal. It never actually really hits it. It passes through it. So one of the lessons with Fibonacci is it's about process, not perfection. A lot of times people are working on some goal in their life, or some aspect of developing themselves or balancing themselves, and they get too hard on themselves. And if they say, you know, they want to be perfect, they want to take no action and then do it and have it be perfect. But if you look at nature and how nature does it, nature puts something out there and then adjusts and put another thing out there, and it keeps developing and getting closer and closer to that perfect, graceful arc, but it has to take a number of different steps to get there. So for Fibonacci and golden mean ratio, it's about, like, don't be so hard on yourself. It's about the process. It's the perfection through the process. The process is the perfection. And if you go through this process of doing it, you can get closer and closer to that ideal ratio. And also too, that can help you set appropriate goals, because life always looks back to say, what did I just do? The last 2 numbers in the series to create the next one. So you can look at what you did and then use that to plan the next thing. And you're taking step by step in finding that harmony. And the last thing is the torus, like I had mentioned before, about giving and receiving. So that's a model of that. So what I'd like to offer is is sort of a special rate for this new thing that I'm literally just launching. That, you know, so people can tell me what is it they want in their life, instead of me saying, here's what's great about the Fibonacci sequence, or this is amazing about Metatron's cube. I just listen, say, what would you like help with, or what is it you're working with in your life? And then they can tell what things they're working with, what are challenges, what are active parts in their life. And then I can choose the 1 or 2 geometrical archetypes of sacred geometry, say, well, let's start by working with the flower of life and shift perspectives and work with this. And then let's look at the subjective object with Metatron's cube, and to bring these different elements in. And that way I can email people the forms, and I could walk them through a process live and get feedback, and then say, okay, here's what we accomplished with this thing. What are we going to do next? And just until I make sure that I've helped them with their actual situation, rather than it being content first and good luck with the application.
So you're really taking this system and making it tangible and connecting it to our individual lives.
Exactly. And I think that there's sometimes people will think that sacred geometry and meditation, all of these things, is this sacred holy thing. And then my difficult relative or that coworker that drives me nuts, that's not sacred. But in my experience, it's just as sacred as everything else. That manifestation is coming to you in your life at this time, at your point of consciousness, from your point of view, for you to experience in a certain way. And that's a divine thing. If you look at all the guides and angels and all the aspects that are helping to coordinate, to bring those things to you, I mean, how could it be anything but sacred? So it's about honoring the sacredness of everyday life, to say, and now how can we bring some assistance and some perspective through these different geometric tools? So.
Love that. Thank you, Paul.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
So generous.
Oh, thank you so much. And also too, so just the last thing about the sessions is my normal rate for NLP Skype sessions for an hour is 111. I really am a big fan of master numbers, the 55, 77, you know, all these things. So there's a certain unique energy when you do that. The number 5 has an energy. When you double it, 55, that's intensifying the energy. And when you triple it, it's another thing. So what I'd like to offer for, as part of this series, and in gratitude for your question that you asked that sparked that idea, and I kind of created that thing as a result of what the question you asked, that what I'd like to do is, instead of the rate of 111 for the NLP sessions, doing the sacred geometrical sessions for people 1 hour and do it 55. Because I think it's powerful. I think it would really do a lot to help people, but also too, it'd also be nice to be able to try it out without having to spend a lot of money. So I think 55 for an hour, for what people, and they'll have the forms, they'll have the images. They can continue to do the process, and they can continue to work with it and experiment with it. And like that third phase, if they keep working with it and experimenting with it, what's unique, what's the most helpful thing for their awareness and consciousness, what's their next best step will come into their awareness if they let their minds be, that negative polarity while they're creating the form. It's sort of like they're creating a positive polarity with their hands and their objective reality, but their subjective reality is the negative charge. So in your inner impressions, you can draw in information that's relevant to you. So what I could do with them might just be a starting point, but if they continue to use the tools, new impressions and new ways of working with it that's unique to them might come to them.
Fantastic. So exciting. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Wow. Awesome. Oh, the last thing.
Oh yeah, sure.
The workshop.
Oh yes, absolutely, yes.
So what we would be doing, or what you were creating.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So anyway, one of the things that, and it's funny because I just shared a post the other day on Facebook. There is this woman. She's a scientist. I think she's a cosmologist, and she's talking about what it takes to make gold, and that it's sort of like,
one more time. Here we go.
What it takes to make gold. That gold is like, I think it's like two dwarf stars colliding. It's this whole intensive process to actually make gold. It's this very intensive thing. And she was saying that the whole phrase of, we are made of star stuff. She's like, well, literally, you have individual atoms of copper and gold throughout your whole brain, and that plays a part in neurotransmitter. Because copper and gold are very conductive. They are very efficient conductors of electricity. So I posted a thing and someone asked me a question about it. And I was like, oh yeah, I've never done an ORMUS workshop. So what we're talking about is we're going to have at Earth Altar Studio on, let me I just wrote it down. So on the 8th of April 8th from 2 to 4, we're gonna have an event to show you how to make ORMUS. And what ORMUS is it's a precipitate. So you create, you reconstitute seawater. So what I use is I use Dead Sea salt and I use water, like distilled water. When you stir them together, it creates, it recreates the Dead Sea. It recreates that. And then there's this process to precipitate the monoatomic elements out of it. And with Dead Sea salt, one of the things I like about it is they've tested it, and 70% of it is monoatomic gold. So you can create monoatomic gold by doing processes with actual gold, like gold leaf, and it'll end up, when you break all the bonds, it'll look like a white powder. Or you can use Dead Sea salt, or you can even use sea salt from like the Pacific, the Pacific Ocean. It'll just have a much lower percentage of monatomic gold. But what we're going to do at Earth Altar is do the process of showing how to precipitate the ORMUS out of seawater. And then what happens is that it looks like this white powder kind of settles to the bottom of it. And there's a process of refining it and rinsing it. But ultimately what you can do is take it internally, and it really creates a huge shift in my experience of energy, because you're putting these monatomic elements. And just for people that know, really, really pure gold, like gold leaf, if it's very pure gold leaf, you actually can eat it. It's actually, it's fine in your body. And one of the things that's interesting about monatomic gold is that it's the only element, I believe, that can go into superconductivity at body temperatures. So for people who are doing ascension work, all of these different things, raising the level of energy in the body, it's basically, the more you have of that in your body, the more easily you can shift your body to those higher energetic states, because you're basically becoming more conductive in a sense. So anyway, so we're gonna do that. And if you go to my site, then if you go to the page that says upcoming classes and workshops, you can see the upcoming things that I've got, and that will definitely be posted there. And you can look at the link, and that'll take you to Earth Altar, and you can learn all about it.
Awesome. I'm so excited for that. I hope that we get a lot of people to come and make that.
I think it'll be fun. I've had, it's funny because I didn't really think too much of it. And I put this thing on Facebook, and I had multiple people like, where can I learn this? How can I do this? And I'm like, oh, well, I can show you how to do it. You need like a certain kind of pH meter. You need some basic stuff, which I have because I make it. And I thought it might be fun. Just get a group of people and we can all make it together, and it's can be neat.
I can't wait. Thank you, Paul.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much, Justine, for everything. Thanks for everything you're doing with the series. And I'm just so grateful that you asked me to be part of it, and I'm just excited. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for watching the Rainbow Activation Code. If you like what you're hearing, or you feel like someone would really benefit from this conversation, feel free to share it, share the link, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. All the videos will be released publicly on March 14th, so everyone will have access to it through the YouTube channel. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Justine.
I'll see you at the workshop.
Okay, that sounds great. See you then.
Have a beautiful day.
Thanks, you too.
Bye.
All right, bye.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the Rainbow Activation Code. If you are, and you're connecting with the speakers, please look at the links below and connect with them, and reach out and chat and say hi, tell them what you liked. And if you're liking this series in general, please like and subscribe, share the links, send the emails out. We want to spread the knowledge as wide as we can. Thank you so much for being a part of the Rainbow Activation Code. I hope you're enjoying it. See you soon.